All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to be here as well. I'm going to talk through this webinar / course going from teaching to instructional design. So the goals of the course, what we'll cover in this call, and then as you'll see, we'll be sharing a link to go through some self-paced materials as well. But the goals of what we put together is to share multiple perspectives of people who have transitioned to instructional design. So I'm here doing the leading, but the course actually has contributors from a range of different experiences. And so you'll get to hear each of them tell their own narrative, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important later on. Also sharing advice about instructional design from instructional design experts to get a better idea of what you would be getting into and how to excel. Also importantly, to build a reflective community of educators who are embarking on this journey. As you'll see in a minute, we've got lots of discussion prompts and discussion threads in here, and the idea is that you all will be able to share your thoughts, read the thoughts of others, so that can kind of stir your thinking, your imagination a little bit more, and you can have dialogue with each other. We're not going to be doing this in the next hour, but at the end of this, we will share a link to the course where you can go through and have these asynchronous conversations with each other. Also going to share strategies for building out a portfolio. And I just want to mention that this course will be added to over time. So I am in the process of recruiting more contributors who are going to add some content. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about. So this slide presentation is embedded inside of this larger course. So here's a welcome. If you're going through async, you can click this and listen to my other welcome message here. We've got questions, surveys for you all to answer, discussion thread for folks. I'll talk more about the details of this stuff in a minute. And then here we have some more detailed information. So I've got my section that I'll be going through today, but we also have several other instructional designers who have added content in their own section. So we've gathered together all of these resources and advice that are kind of scattered and put them into one place. And every time, like I said, we'll be adding more folks. And then at the bottom here, we have some tips for creating portfolio in Canopy. So I will give you all access so you can join this course as a learner. You'll also have the messages feature, so you'll be able to send me and the other contributors DMs through there. All right, so now back to this part of the presentation. I want to emphasize that this course is meant as development, not training. What I mean by that is training is how to do a specific task in a specific way. A lot of instructional design is training. Like there's this thing we need people to know how to do, and this is how you do it, and you just need to teach them how to do it in that specific way. Some other instructional design is focused on development. Development is more about creating mindsets, habits of behavior. It's preparing people to be able to navigate unforeseen circumstances. A lot of times these ideas get muddled together, and you can have some training as part of development. But I want to make this distinction here to emphasize the fact that throughout this course, there are these reflection prompts that are just designed to get you thinking. They're not designed to lead you to any specific actions necessarily, but it is designed to get you thinking and for you to develop certain mindsets and ways of thinking that will help you in this transition to instructional design. Now, before we really begin, I just want to say, because I know a lot of people here are in the classroom right now, that it is okay to leave the classroom. You do not need to shoulder the burden of a dysfunctional system. Also, you can always come back. I have entered and left the classroom 3 times. And so I just want to say that, because I know that it can be a tough decision for folks, and just, it's okay to leave. Like if you don't feel that you are getting what you want out of your current role, then you should find something that makes you feel fulfilled in the ways you deserve to be fulfilled. I'm going to give you a very quick version of my 16 years in education here, just so you have a little bit better idea of who I am and where my expertise comes from. So I got started teaching through Teach for America in 2006. I taught at the lowest performing school in the South Bronx. I then became a policy analyst after that because I thought that was the type of career that I wanted. Turns out I didn't really like being a policy analyst, and I missed working with young people. And so I took a pay cut from, I think it was like 54K to 35 to go work in youth development. And I worked in youth development for a while, and I started a nonprofit for high potential teens in low performing schools. After doing that for a while, I then returned to the classroom because an opportunity presented itself, and I was just really interested in learning design. I realized that that's what I wanted to do, and I had this opportunity to create a US history curriculum. So I returned to the classroom for 2 years. Then I left again to be an instructional coach. Then I spent the 2015-16 school year traveling around the world. I visited top-ranked schools across 5 different continents, and I wrote about the experience. Then when I returned in the summer of 2016, I thought that I wanted to be a principal. And so I returned to the classroom in a classroom admin hybrid role, and quickly realized that I did not want to be a principal. I had all of this unique experience and insights that I wanted to be able to bring to my role. And I realized that I wasn't being given the freedom to kind of spread my wings. And that time I left the classroom in Thanksgiving, and I started a consulting and instructional design business. Over the next several years, I grew that instructional design business from working for free, actually paying people to work, to 6-figure income for several years in a row. Then I was able to take that money and use it to found an EdTech company called Canopy. Now, you're probably most interested in starting the instructional design company part of that work. I'm going to go into a little bit more nuance on all of this later, but just to complete this part of my narrative, when I was starting to do instructional design, I was like begging people and organizations for the privilege of working for free. I had some ideas specifically around teacher professional development of how we could use online learning and self-paced learning to enhance professional development strategies. And I kept asking people if I could create stuff for free just to have some proof of concept for this. I even paid some SMEs or subject matter experts to codify their expertise. I do not recommend doing that, but I'm just emphasizing sort of like how much I was going in that direction to get some proof of concept. I did get a portfolio by doing this work that I used to pitch ideas to my existing network, people and connections that I already knew. And then I was able to find a niche with these scripted whiteboard animations and quality engagement activities that exceeded expectations with the quality and the experience for learners. And because of that, I was able to start getting referrals. And while I started working for free, each referral I got, I started charging people a bit more than the previous client. And then I started to get into a position where I could approach state level organizations with ideas about creating their professional development strategies. There would be requests for proposals, and I would apply to that and get it. As we grew, I brought on some grad students to help out with some, specifically a lot of the editing work that my style involved. And I still do some select instructional design work, even though most of my day-to-day is focused on Canopy, the platform. I really enjoy it. I just love designing learning experiences. And so I take some stuff on. I'm currently working with the Maryland State Educators Association on this like 30 module, how to be a trauma-informed educator course. And I'm doing some work for a coaching organization that does peer facilitated coaching groups around the world called Peer Forum. Each contract that I would get is kind of like getting a new job, and also this experience of being an independent instructional designer allowed me to see what the expectations are for this type of role in a number of different organizations. And those insights inform the tips that I'm going to share in the next part of this presentation. Okay. Also, like I mentioned, just going through here, this course is designed as real development. It's designed to prompt you. It's not just me giving you this information. It's designed to prompt you to, think through, some of these ideas, right? So when you join this course after this call, you've got these questions. What is the point of this course? Which is a basic recall question. A poll, how prepared are you right now to be an excellent instructional designer? I'm curious to see what the distribution on these poll options are. Everything from this is a brand new idea to I'm super prepared. And then we have this discussion question. Like I said, another point of all of this is to create a sense of community amongst all of you. So in our first discussion question here, just talking about something you currently do. And then more importantly, what is one part of your current role that you are exceptionally good at? And having practice and naming that will help you to describe your strengths in an interview process. You can add some other stuff too. Once you enter your response here, you'll be able to see what everybody else has said and you can reply to each other. Okay, I'm going to move into this next section. This section of the course is another poll. This is a video of me saying basically the same thing you just heard me say, so we'll skip over that part. Okay, reflection, tips, and activities. I will also point out that all of these PowerPoint presentations have audio attached as well, so you can listen to my audio narration on your own time. What I'm saying live now is more elaborate and in-depth than this audio, but it'll give you an idea. Or if you know people who want to go through this later, they can get the benefit of some narration. Okay, now I'm going into the first of 3 pieces of advice that I have for everyone. The first piece of advice is know what you want, but be open to other ideas. So I really want to emphasize that instructional design jobs aren't all the same. Jobs in instructional design are as different as jobs in teaching are. Think about the difference between a kindergarten teacher or a high school teacher, somebody teaching in an urban versus a rural environment, being at a school with a supportive administration versus a compliance-driven administration, right? A kindergarten teacher in an urban school might love that job, but they might not want to teach high school in a rural school and vice versa. And so when you're applying for instructional design roles, it's really important that you're thinking through more specifically the type of instructional design you want to do and the type of organization that you want to work at, right? It's not just this catch-all for something that allows me to do what I'm passionate about, creating learning experiences. The roles will vary dramatically from place to place. And so some things to consider when you're thinking about this is, who do you want to design for? A lot of ID roles are for internal staff at an organization, right? We're at this org and we need our people to develop, and I'm doing all my stuff is internal for those people. Some instructional design is for technology users, right? Helping people learn how to use an EdTech product. A lot of instructional design, and a lot of what I've done is where it's professional development for educators, where K-12 educators are the audience. Or you could have external clients, for another type of organization, like what I'm currently doing with Peer Forum. Some instructional designers work at universities where you're collaborating with professors to create courses. All of these are very different roles, and all of them are very different whether you're talking about a large or a small organization. And so it's important to think through, like, what are the types of projects that you want to do? Do you want to do more training oriented stuff? It's like, I want to be very specific on how to do this specific thing in a specific way, and I'm great at that. Or do you want to focus more on analysis and evaluation? Or you don't like analysis and evaluation and you really just want to do design and implementation. A lot of the ID roles are out there are specific to like one part of the ADDI process. And ADDI, if you're not familiar, is analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. It's the most common instructional design process that's out there. It's worth thinking, like, what about that process? Which parts of this, analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation, what gives you the most energy? Do you love the whole thing? Or do you really enjoy some pieces or not others? You might be able to find roles that are specific to that. So again, first, know thyself. Being able to answer all those questions will make you better prepared for your interview. Also, just having done that reflection and having a strong grasp of why you want to be an instructional designer will help you to not only identify those specific roles, but to be able to come off like you're excited about them in the interview. Most people have spent more time reflecting about why they want to leave the classroom. They spend more time reflecting about leaving the classroom than about why specifically they want these specific roles. So make sure you balance that out. Otherwise, there's a risk that you could come off lopsided on that. But don't let all this planning make you close-minded. Right? You want to reflect, you want to have answer those questions, you want to be able to explain yourself in detail about the type of instructional design role that would be ideal for you, the type of organization that you would want to work at. But those thoughts will evolve. I mean, they might evolve with every job description that you read, after every interview that you have. That's fine for them to evolve. The point is that you should be able to speak intelligently about how you're considering the nuances of each question. It's also okay if you end up thinking about, like, okay, maybe instructional design isn't my thing. Maybe I really want to do training, and which is really just focused on the implementation side of things. Or you end up wanting to do marketing or customer success or something like that. That's great. But the point is to be able to speak intelligently about the type of role you want, what you want to be able to do in that type of role, and the type of organization that you would like to be at. Even if it's evolving over time. All right, so this is another micro presentation. This course is made of micro presentations, basically. So there's this one, and then you can click through this presentation again on your own and listen to the audio. And then we have this discussion question underneath where you can say, why do you want to be an instructional designer? What types of projects do you want to work on? Again, the point here is that you share your thoughts, so you have to put them together and share them, but you will also see what all these other people are saying, and you can get inspiration from how other people are framing their desires. So I'm looking forward to seeing this discussion thread, and I'll chime in on the discussion thread as well. Okay, tip number 2, know your ADDI, which I already started talking about. Okay, ADDI is by far the most popular instructional design framework. There are other ones out there, but ADDI is really the foundation of it. Again, it's analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate. Most of you have experience doing this, in a classroom, although you might call it, pre-assessment, student improvement plan, evaluation, etc., or assessment evaluation. When you're talking about ADDI or thinking about the ADDI process, it's really important to differentiate yourself. I was going to mention this earlier. This is the most competitive job market to be an instructional designer that there has ever been. With so many teachers looking to transition and keying in on instructional design, combined with the fact that instructional design and continuous learning is becoming an increasingly important part of most organizations, it's making it very competitive. And it's really important to be able to differentiate yourself. As a teacher, employers know that you can implement a training. Everyone applying for these roles will be able to describe how they design and develop trainings. You can really differentiate yourself with the A and the E of ADDI, with the analysis and evaluation. So, like, do you do diagnostics? Do you use them to inform instruction? Do you collect data from teaching and evaluate it? Do you make adjustments based off of that, data? Like this, the diagnostic, making the plan, evaluation, making adjustments is much more interesting to most employers. And those are also the pieces that really separate the good from the great instructional designers. And again, most importantly, non-educators don't realize how much of this analysis and eval work is already in your day-to-day job, because their idea of teachers are this thousands and thousands of hours they spent, from their own, K-12 experience. They didn't see teachers doing this analysis and eval work, right? They just saw the implementation side. And so it's a blind spot for a lot of people of how data-driven teaching today is. And also because a lot of teachers don't generally love their PLCs, you can, or data team meetings or what have you, like oftentimes you don't emphasize these skill sets, but I would really suggest emphasizing that and moving it to the front of your narrative of your skills as an educator. All right, and that is it for the know your ADDI part. And again, really emphasize that A and the E part because it'll help differentiate you. Now for the engagement pieces, which again, the original plan was to have you all do this live as we're going through. We just don't have enough time for everyone to do this in a meaningful way. So I think it'll be better if you have time to reflect a little bit, put something in more thoughtful, really take your time reading through what other people have written, as opposed to me saying like, okay, 5 minutes, everybody do this, which you don't really get the benefit of the community and being able to sharpen each other's thinking. But you can come in after this course, we'll give you the course code and engage in this discussion, how to use analysis and evaluation. Here, I just threw this text in with some audio. Later, a quick thought on textbooks, curriculum, and subject matter experts. A lot of times people will ask you about working with subject matter experts. Maybe you don't have a ton of experience with that type of language, but a lot of you probably have curriculum or textbooks written by PhDs who are subject matter experts, and you're told that you need to do the whole thing, and it doesn't really work that way. And so you need to take that elaborate, dense, complicated information and figure out ways to chunk it into bite-sized lessons and differentiate for different learners in your classroom so that it's accessible to everyone. That is a type of relationship with subject matter experts, right? Being able to take this expertise, it might not be an actual conversation with them, but it's codified in the textbooks and curriculum. Take that expertise and translate it into accessible learning experiences for people. And so you can talk about that whenever people ask you about SMEs. Okay. Also in the course, we have this audio response question asking you to describe a time when you conducted analysis to determine a need, designed and implemented a plan to address a need, and then evaluated the effectiveness of that plan. It's one thing to kind of know what you want to say or like type it into that discussion before, but here you can practice actually saying it, kind of like interview rehearsal. So you click this and you can record yourself and then you can play it back, and you can record yourself and play it back and just really try and get that polished. That type of experience will really help refine what you're doing. Again, like I said, this is designed for development. That'll help you just be more comfortable on your feet talking about some of this. Also, myself or some of the other contributors can go through and hear it and send you feedback. Okay, so we talked about know thyself. We talked about emphasizing the A and E of ADDI. Next piece of advice that I want to talk about is portfolios and work samples. Like I mentioned earlier, I started doing instructional design work by requesting to make stuff for free. This helped me build my portfolio, but more importantly, it helped me figure out what I was doing. I had been a classroom educator. I had designed youth development curriculum. I had done professional development for educators as an instructional coach. Instructional design is different. working with experts to translate stuff for, you know, a self-paced environment, especially. It's different. I needed to figure out models. I learned a lot by doing that free work. And it also allowed me to be more, you know, comfortable and confident when I was explaining to people what it actually meant for me to do instructional design. And so I really very highly recommend creating a real project that real people will go through for a real reason, and you'll get real data out of it. I've seen people sharing advice to aspiring instructional designers recently that's like, you know, it doesn't matter what your portfolio is about. You know, you can make it about like making a sandwich or like some other generic thing. That may have been okay advice a couple years ago, but given how competitive the job market is right now, you need to assume there's going to be like 100 applications for every role. And some of those people are going to have like real world example portfolios, and they are going to stand out over those who do not. And so I really suggest figuring out a way to create a learning experience for free for someone. So would your school be open to you making a course or training for the faculty? And again, having adult learners is also important. Personally, I think designing for teenagers is more difficult, but people will just respect adult learners a little bit more. I mean, designing a first grade classroom day, I think, is the most difficult thing, but it's not going to translate to people who don't have that experience as well. So think about what you can do for, you know, faculty. If your school's not a great fit there, like think about a local nonprofit or some other organization that you might be a part of that at any point is training people or sharing information with folks, and see if you can create a real, you know, a real project for them. When you do this, make sure to actually implement ADDI so that you can then talk about the process. How did you do analysis to identify a need? How did you design the general strategy or framework of it? How did you develop the actual materials? What was the implementation like? How did you know it was effective or not? You know, try and do that whole process. And again, make sure to collect the data on the effectiveness. This is another way where you'll be able to really differentiate yourself. Everyone can talk about designing and implementing stuff, but being able to be like, and then I had this data and I, you know, I took it and I did these things with it. And then I went in, I did a follow-up. That's what'll really get people's attention. And here, this is just more idiosyncratic to me. This is kind of standard, but it's actually not a really good idea. This like, did you enjoy the training? Like, oh, these 95% of people were satisfied with the training. That says nothing about their learning transfer. It's actually really easy to get high satisfaction scores with low effectiveness training, because effective training actually requires some discomfort. But it is standard. People love to be like, oh, 96% enjoyed my training. So you can have some of this question, but also try and assess the actual effectiveness of whatever training that you're talking about. Like, did it result in real learning transfer? And if you can talk about that, like after the training we followed up and people were doing these things differently, that's when you're really, you know, sounding like you're ready to be a professional with this stuff. Okay, so just some ideas here of what this can look like. The most important thing is that you should do what is needed in your school or other community, right? That's the analysis part of ADDI. Do something that will provide real value. Here are some ideas. So for your school, you could do new teacher onboarding. You could do how to organize a field trip. I know we're not really doing field trips so much right now, but it's an elaborate process. The reason I put it in here is because a lot of instructional design trainings are about how to like implement an elaborate process that requires touching base with multiple different people and doing paperwork in a specific way. And so I thought field trip was a good example of that, but any process oriented training is also good. how to use different EdTech products in class, again, translates to, training for EdTech users, outside of your communities. A course on effective collaboration between teachers and paras. That's a lot of, instructional design projects are about teams working together. So, I mean, you could do that and then have teachers and paras at your school go through it. Getting away from the teachers as an audience part, you could look at new family onboarding. When the new family, students or family join your school, what kind of onboarding do they get for that? Probably not a lot. If you offer to create something like that for your admin, they might be open to something like that. And then finally, if your school is just really not a great place for you to do this, approach a nonprofit or community organization about what they need and offer to build it for free. Okay, and then again here, we've got this discussion where I'm hoping you guys will share ideas and then respond to each other. You have an idea that you have. I'm sure some of you will come up with ideas more clever, interesting than what I just shared, more relevant to modern context. Then you can steal those ideas from each other. And then check out the bottom of this course for info on how to use Canopy to create these trainings and turn them into a public portfolio. I'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so synthesis. Know thyself and why you want to do this. Having this sense of what you're good at, what you really enjoy doing, and how that applies to the roles that you're going for, being able to talk about that just as in depth and with the same specificity as you might talk about why you want to leave teaching, will just put you in a really good place to be able to navigate these interviews and figure out which applications that you even want to submit. Emphasize the A and the E of ADDI, right? So that's the analysis and the evaluation part that will really help you to stand out. And finally, make a real training and have real people go through it, and be able to talk about the ADDI process of that progression. Especially if you can talk about doing it for adult learners and how you took initiative to do it. That's the other piece I didn't mention earlier, is that if you're going out of your way to create this training and having people go through it, that is also communicating to people that you have initiative, which is really powerful and can help people stand out in crowded markets. Okay, and then which of the ideas you find most useful? What will you do with these ideas? And all these prompts are designed just as development prompts. That is most of what I have for the general overview and tips. I can take a few questions at this point, and then I will talk more specifically about building portfolios and what that can look like. But
yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of great questions, so I'll give you some that really stood out. So first, someone was wondering how common is it to be an independent contractor when you're working in instructional design?
Yeah, I think a lot of people I can start out as independent contractors, and then most people aren't able to have the luck that I had, or haven't spent the 10 years making connections with people who end up moving to state departments of education or whatever. So a lot of times people will do some independent contracting work. They're building out their portfolio, they're building out their resume, and then they can apply as a freelancer and get a role with a larger organization. But I think it's fairly common for people to be doing freelance instructional design. This is also indicative of where the market is as far as the demand for instructional designers. If an organization doesn't have one on staff and they need one, then they're going to be asking around. And if somebody mentions your name, they'll might go with you. Right? It's kind of hard to vet, instructional design firms that are out there, and so you can get a long ways with referrals if you are exceeding expectations and have the right people talking about you.
And then another person asked after that was, when it comes to instructional design, where do you stand on the accessibility of the content for learners with exceptionalities? So he shared that he himself is visually impaired, for example, and some materials sometimes too visual. So he's wondering if you've worked in that particular field.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of audio. Throughout this course we've just been looking at, there's audio attached all the way throughout. I'm a big fan of using audio to enhance. I think that you should have, readings. You can have graphic visuals that take, 5-page reading and turn it into a nice graphic that's not too crowded. And then you should have audio narration that goes on top of that as well. And if you're doing in-person live trainings, and there's a whole nother set of things that you can do to make sure that things are accessible to everyone. And while that question's out there, I will mention that the onus is on the designer to create something that is accessible for everyone, even if you don't know who's going to be in the training. Like, accessible trainings are good trainings. Even back to like this sequence I had here about like go ahead and get to work, like providing multiple ways to demonstrate your learning, right? So we've got, type discussion and then respond to a peer, and then also have the audio response question, which is in one of these, right? Giving people multiple ways to respond is really valuable.
And then someone was also wondering, they're interested in DE&I work and looking at instructional design as a way to empower educators and closing that gap. And they were just wondering if there are roles that are connected between ID and diversity, equity, and inclusion out there.
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of ID roles opening up a year and a half or so ago. I've been seeing fewer DEI roles out now. Some organizations, like I know a lot of like police departments got a bunch of money to do DEI trainings with people. I know some folks who got those contracts and they were like, well, just kind of miserable about it, because it turned out that those people didn't really want the training, and it's really hard to do effective training when people don't want to be there. But I was seeing a lot of DEI trainings come out in that kind of a context. I mean, it's definitely very important. Just my take on the quantity or availability of those slots, it's not as much as it used to be, a year or two ago, but it's a lot more than it was 5 years ago, that's for sure. So overall, I think that the demand for those types of roles is increasing. It might be hard to find something that's specific to DEI, just total, and instructional design. I mean, you might have somebody who oversees, DEI for an organization, but they would be doing instructional design and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Although, as I'm saying this, I'm remembering I do know one instructional designer who specializes in doing DEI trainings for a whole bunch of different organizations, and she is a freelancer. And so if that's the passion and interest, then trying to go freelance might be the way to do it, because that way you can provide that type of service for a bunch of different orgs instead of trying to find one org that has full-time work just for DEI instructional design year round.
And that's actually, someone asked a little bit later if it would make sense to actively search for freelance positions before a full-time position, not only as a way to build your portfolio, but maybe to take on certain projects you're passionate about. And I think that kind of ties in line with that other question. So what do you think there?
Yeah, I would really highly recommend, this is my like go ahead and get to work, like build something for free for someone advice. Yes, you should start freelance if at all possible, and do the first thing for free. Like that's kind of how you need to do it. People won't pay you if you don't have a track record. But once you do that first thing, you'll learn a whole lot. Your next one will be a lot better, and people will start to know what you're up to. So I would definitely recommend doing some freelance, start for free, but then start charging people. You charge your next client, they're getting a real bargain. And then you keep upping how much you're charging with each new client that you get.
Yeah. And then another question was, when you're building your portfolio, what do you do if the things you have created are owned by the district?
Yeah, that like intellectual property situation. I have heard of districts coming down on teachers for that. I have also heard of like nobody notices, nobody cares. Um, you can use it as a portfolio. You can show people I created this. Legally speaking, from an intellectual property copyright perspective, you are not allowed to give it to them for them to do. You're not allowed to take it and do it with their people, but you can show them what you created. There's nothing wrong with that.
And then two more questions before we get back to the portfolio. So someone was wondering how to get around the cost of things like Storyline or 360. And yeah, how to get around, let me see. So they said, how do you recommend working around the cost of the software used in ID, like Articulate 360 or Captivate?
Yeah, so you're gonna get 30 days free for Articulate. And you can build a bunch of stuff in 30 days and download it as SCORM files and never have a subscription. If you want to get around it, that's the most straightforward way to do it. Some people use multiple email addresses to keep getting 30-day subscriptions. That is in violation of Articulate's terms, which you agree to. So, I wouldn't recommend doing that. But you can build a lot of stuff in 30 days, if you really make use of that 30-day trial. And you get them, right? You get the SCORM files and you can put them other places, like in Canopy, for example.
Which leads into the last question I wanted to ask, and we'll still cover questions at the end because I know there are a lot more, but I don't want to take away from showing how to build the portfolio. So someone has said, speaking of portfolios, is there a suggestion for which platform is most effective? The amount of options can be overwhelming.
Yeah, there are a lot of options. You should have something with an industry standard like Articulate Rise. For example, I think Rise is better in Storyline. I'm not really impressed with Storyline. It's like, I don't know, it doesn't do a lot to deepen learning. It looks nice, but you're going to get your high satisfaction scores, but it doesn't do much for learning transfer. Rise is good. So you should do something with that. As far as where to host it, a lot of people put it on, Wix websites or, Squarespace or something like that. I'm going to show you how you can do it in Canopy too, if you like. And then I'll also mention here that when you come into this course, there's this messages feature. So if you click on messages, this account is in a whole bunch of courses. You'll just have this teaching to instructional design. You can expand it down. And these are the co-teachers who are added on this course. You can send me DMs through here, and I'll respond to any questions here afterwards. So once again, you'll get access to this course at the end of this call. Come in, feel free to DM me questions. In here, it's easier for me to navigate than my email, which is kind of a mess. Okay, so this platform that we've been in here the whole time is Canopy. And it turns out, we didn't build it for this initially, but it turns out it's actually a pretty ideal place to create a portfolio. So I'm going to talk through some of this here as well. So why use Canopy to create a portfolio? Here's a link to a sample. I'll show you that in a second. Actually, no, let's lead with looking at the sample portfolio. All right, so if you build a portfolio in Canopy, it will externally facing, it will look like this. You can have a custom logo up top. So this is my old original consulting logo that I created for this custom community. You can have, do whatever image you want here with Square. You could just talk about your portfolio and yourself in this section. And then the courses that you add to it will be here. And then when people open up the courses, then they can see all of the content. They can come down here and expand. This is a Canopy features course. Expand this, expand lessons, and they can review all of the content. And you can put a whole bunch of different stuff together. One of the things I'll mention in the advantages part is that you can also add audio, which again, as far as differentiating yourself, I think is really powerful. So when they're reviewing their portfolio, they can listen to your actual voice, explaining, the origin of the training, explaining why these different things are in here, explaining how it went when, people really went through it. You can add this audio throughout. So you're able to explain yourself. It's not just sitting there static. And so this is what it looks like. Like I said, you have this, as my Zoom bar is hiding my tabs. You have this main portfolio page, and then each of the courses in it are also their own page. These are external facing. You don't need a Canopy account to access these. So you could link to that main portfolio page, or you could link just to these individual courses. And like I mentioned, you can embed SCORM files from Articulate Rise in here as well. This is the 5 Pillars of Reading course that we did for folks. So this is the type of stuff I do. We specialize in these whiteboard animations, and then we have visual of it. We've got resources underneath it. So that's an example of the end product, what it would look like if you were to build it in Canopy. I'll go into a little bit more detail on why Canopy is a good fit. Top 10 list. So first off, you could attach audio. Like I was just saying, you do it as a welcome message. It establishes a personal connection and allows you to elaborate on everything. You can also add your analysis and evaluation pieces at the beginning and the end of your courses to explain those parts, like I was saying earlier, emphasize the A and the E of ADDI. And you can embed SCORM files, right? So if you build something in Articulate Rise and you download it, you can embed it into Canopy so people can engage with it. Reasons 4 and 5, learner engagement. So this again gets back to that accessibility piece a little bit too. You can do a lot more different types of engagement in Canopy. So, discussion threads, you can have people edit PDFs, they can do audio and video responses, they can do Canva assignments and submit them. Having a portfolio that demonstrates how you can use these types of higher level engagement activities can also help your courses stand out, right? There's just more ways that learners are engaging with your content. And that also relates to emphasizing inclusion, right? Having a variety of ways for learners to engage and demonstrate their learning, whether that's through audio or video or a graphic design or a short answer question or whatever. Being able to show how you're using all those different pieces, which you can't do in Articulate or some of the other ones, allows you to talk about how you're emphasizing inclusion, which is becoming more and more popular. I don't think I ever heard universal design for learning like until a few years ago. And now I hear it like every day. Custom branding, like I was just showing, you can put your logo on top and do the image. You can customize your background color. You can also use the analytics features to access data and demonstrate impact. You can take screenshots of like the graphs and whatnot and put them in at the end. Accessible price. So you can create the dynamic portfolio with your own logo and everything at the $10 a month price for Canopy, as opposed to $100 a month for Articulate or some other platforms. If you do not want custom branding for your external page or your own community, you can also do a lot with the free version of it as well. Ease of use. By far the most intuitive course creation platform. You can create stuff much more quickly in Canopy, and this is get feedback from me. If you do choose to design in Canopy and send me your external portfolio links, I'll look through it and I'll give you feedback. At least in the short term, I might need to walk that back if it starts taking up a bunch of my time, but I do enjoy looking at people's courses and talking with them about how they might want to make it better, especially if it involves utilizing some of the features they might not be aware of. So again, you can make a portfolio in Canopy. The main page will look like this, and then you can open up So you could link to this, or you could link to just the individual courses, which look like this, where people can actually access the materials. And then here, how to create and publish your portfolio. There's a video in here. Again, when you access the course, you can come to this part. This will just show you exactly how to do it, what it actually means to create this example that I just showed you. All right, that's all that I have. I guess we can share the course code and how to access this course with folks now. And we can take questions for a few more minutes. I'm also able to stick around afterwards as well for questions if we keep going.
Awesome, and I'm just grabbing that course code. So I just sent one to the course download page where you can set up your account from there. But another one is if you go to canopyed.com and click learner, or the I'm here to learn, and then create your account, it's free. And then it'll ask you for a code, and that's that teaching to ID.
Yeah, so what that looks like, again, canopyed.com, you don't need to /me on there, just canopyed.com is fine. And then you can click I'm here to learn when you sign up or sign in with Google. I'll sign in with a different account. And then when you come in, you'll see this, and then you just do teaching to ID. Or you can go through the public course page. Right, but that's how you join it, and then you'd be able to go through.
And then there's some more questions too that have been coming in. So I'll just kind of go through to ask them if that works. So someone said this might be a very basic question, but they're wondering if there's a difference between a learning and development specialist and an instructional designer.
So people are starting to say learning and development more than instructional design. I think that job description is evolving a little bit. Instructional designer is still the most common, the most popular way to describe the role. If somebody's talking about learning and development, it probably means they're a little bit more forward thinking. They're a little bit more interested in someone who's going to do development, who's going to do the full scope of ADDI, of like analyzing what's needed, figuring out ways to design more interesting sort of growth experiences for people. At least that's what it should be. And you're starting to see more organizations use that language. They're basically the same thing. At the very beginning of the call, I emphasized that this course and the way the reflection prompts are set up is for development as opposed to training. Instructional designers do a lot of training. I personally do mostly development work, even though it's called instructional design.
And someone else was wondering how many companies look for instructional design certificates and certifications. Obviously, you won't have an exact number, but do you find that that's really common?
It's more important to have a portfolio and to be able to talk about how you've done the work and to be able to show them work samples. That will trump a certification. The only reason like a certification is really important is if it's a very large organization that's using like AI to screen resumes, and they've like put that in there as a thing to check. I mean, it doesn't hurt, it's good to have, but a strong portfolio is more important.
I was muted. Someone was also then asking, in line with that, they know that LinkedIn has a lot of certificate courses for instructional design. Are those worth checking out in your perspective?
They are worth checking out if they make you a better instructional designer. Like you should do that to get the skills so that you can do the good work. Doing it for the paper certification, who cares? But if you learn something that's useful and then you're better, like that's the reason to do it. And I've navigated here to this public page to enroll in this course. This link is in the chat. If you click free here, you'll be able to enroll in the course. And again, I really encourage you to do that. And again, just emphasizing that it's not just me in the sections that we talked about. Tabitha and Michelle have also added videos where they tell their stories and how they became instructional designers. Jeanette and Janet have not done so yet, but they said that they will have it in by the end of the week, and we'll have more contributors adding to the course as well. And so just back to my original point of like how diverse the instructional design field is as far as the different types of roles, it's really important to me to organize a number of different perspectives so that you can hear from different people, because everybody's got their own story with this journey. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing now.
And then I'll just keep going with questions, so please keep dropping them in, y'all. So someone said they haven't seen many ID job postings that are truly entry level and not requiring 5+ years of instructional design experience. Besides freelancing, any advice on how educators can leverage their teaching experience and translate their skill set for an instructional design role without coming off as misleading or an imposter?
Yeah, I mean, there's entry level stuff. There's a lot of higher level stuff. I'd recommend following Cara North, C-A-R-A North on LinkedIn. She posts instructional design jobs almost every day. I think she tries to post them every day, but she curates and posts instructional design jobs. I'll throw that information into the course somewhere too. But it's Cara with a C, North. I've been looking at them just to like see what types of things people are asking in the job descriptions, which I find interesting. So yeah, I'd look out there. I mean, you shouldn't count your teaching experience as instructional design experience. People aren't going to like that too much. 5 years is a lot. I don't know. I mean, generally speaking, people are just apply for stuff you're not technically qualified for. Advice is so rampant now that people are used to seeing resumes. It doesn't hurt to throw it in there, especially if you have a good portfolio and a good story.
Yeah. And then also just for anyone asking, yes, this will be recorded. It is being recorded and will be sent out. There are some other great questions. I'm just trying to find them. Someone was looking for about giving some examples of different projects and companies and what you would charge for them. So I think that's like if they're looking to go into freelancing, like how do you build out your pricing?
I mean, again, I would start in network with people that you know, and do stuff for free. After that, you can go $50 an hour, $75 an hour, $100 an hour, $150 an hour is sort of how at least how my pay scale went up. And now I'm at a position me today now with the reputation and record that I have, I charge $150 an hour for my time, and I charge $50 an hour for my team's time, and then I pay my team $30 an hour. And I provide management for them, et cetera. So that's where I'm at. But I did not start charging $150 an hour. You know, you want to get your portfolio going. And most importantly, because you'll learn. Like, I didn't deserve $150 an hour when I started. I wasn't as good as I am now. Even though I had over a decade of education experience designing PD and everything. Once you're approaching cold clients, people that are outside of your network, $100 an hour is the floor. You should not be under 100. If it's a cold client, that's sort of the floor to be a respectable designer.
Great. So I know we're at time, so I don't want to hold you guys past that. William and I will stay on if any of you guys want to come on and ask questions too. I think I've gotten through most of them. Abby, you have one, I'll ask that, but yeah, so if you want to stay on and get your questions answered, please do. Abby was wondering, William, for the software needed to become an instructional designer, you mentioned Rise, Articulate. What were some of the other ones you mentioned too in there?
Yeah, so I mean, organizing that stuff, or doing the experiences that come in a SCORM file that you can put into different LMSs. So articulating storyline is important. People like Camtasia a lot because you can do screencasts and do sort of transitions. In the course, Tabitha has recorded her video using Camtasia, so you can see what that looks like, where like the titles and transitions are happening, which is nice. I mean, honestly, most of this stuff is done with like PowerPoint. So, you know, have good PowerPoints. Nearpod, you know, is good. So there's those training parts. Another thing that can help you stand out though, and that's also really important, is to be able to make visuals. So to be able to create, like in Canva, a graphic that is like as a reference, right? People aren't going to go through the training over and over again, but they go through the training, then at the end, they have a one-page reference document, and it's designed nicely in Canva, and it looks attractive. So being able to do that type of stuff in Canva is good. Some people want to get fancy and use Adobe. If you like are a graphic designer, like go ahead and use Adobe, but otherwise, Canva is great.
And then Heather was wondering, so it sounds like she's developed some courses. She dislikes recording her own audio, so she's played for this like AI system to do it, but it does sound realistic. She's wondering if that's typically frowned upon by clients.
I haven't used AI. I've had clients, I more often have clients who want to record their own audio. So I'll do the scripts for them. And then I give people 3 options. We will do the audio. You can find somebody on your team to record the audio, or you can hire a professional voice actor. I've never used AI. Voice actors are pretty cheap, honestly. Like they're good at reading stuff. It takes them like 5 minutes and you give them like $20. They do pretty well on the hourly for that.
Yeah, I've used voice actors for marketing projects, but it's not too expensive. Someone's looking if you could give a specific example of ways to emphasize the A and the E. They've had a hard time mentally translating their years of teaching experience to ID related speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's analysis and evaluation. So I think the most straightforward way to do it is like pre-test or diagnostics. This will vary a lot based off of what grade level you're teaching. I mean, if you teach lower elementary, then you've done reading assessments and placed kids into reading levels, and that's straight analysis. It's a little bit more complicated as you get older, but I mean, anytime that you're looking at data, student data, and then you are developing strategies informed by that data, which is done most places. I don't know if it's done at your school necessarily, but it's how you figure out what needs to be done, right? And again, not every role will require you to do that. Some of the roles, especially entry-level roles, someone else will do the analysis, someone else will do the evaluation. They're just coming to you, be like, put these materials together, or go through existing materials and change them. Some of the roles you won't even have to worry about that, but some of them do expect you to do the full spectrum, to figure out what the organization needs to do, and all the way through whether or not your strategy was effective, and then use that information to inform the next one.
And then on that subject of evaluation, Catherine's wondering how you would gather data on the effectiveness of a training if you were doing it voluntarily for a local nonprofit.
It's going to depend on the training. You should have like a satisfaction question at the end of it, even though I'm like pretty anti those for like assessing effectiveness, but you should have that so you can say it, because people expect that data. Whatever the training is on, figure out a way to follow up to see if it was effective, right? So the people who participated in it, they were supposed to get some sort of skill and then implement that skill and do a follow-up. That data is going to be much more interesting and persuasive than just the satisfaction. You can be like 95% of people were satisfied, and when we followed up, 87% of people had effectively done this thing differently. That's much more interesting.
And then I really like this question from Grace. So basically, does an instructional designer make courses for a business?
Yes. Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. And then Ian's wondering if should a portfolio be mock and real course designs or show examples of data and creations?
Portfolio, again, there's a lot of old advice out there that says your portfolio, it doesn't matter what your portfolio is as long as you're demonstrating the skills. I just don't believe that's true anymore. You're going to be in a pile with 100 other applications, and a lot of them are going to have real world portfolios where they really did something, they got real data out of it. So yeah, it should be something that you really did. I mean, you could talk about a student who was had an IEP and like had accommodations. You need to like do that and then follow up. I mean, the IEP structure, any special education people out there, is ADDI. Like that's what an IEP is. It's like analyze what's going on with the student. You design the strategy for the accommodations you need. You develop the actual accommodations. You implement it daily. Then you meet with the family on a quarterly basis or every semester, and you evaluate how it's going, and you adjust the IEP. Like that is ADDI. If there's any SPED folks out there.
Great. And then I think this is the last question. Gabriel's wondering, does the course included that you've shared out include any resources about instructional design and learning theory, or about how to make a course look visually appealing?
I have a professional development on the science of learning that I can link in there. I built it for an alternative certification program years ago, and they let me give it away. So I can put that in there. As far as it doesn't necessarily hit on the visually appealing part of it, though, it more talks about how people move information from working memory or from the environment into working memory into long-term memory, and strategies to do that more effectively, which is super useful for instructional design, being able to do that effectively. For now, I would recommend just Googling Universal Design for Learning, and you'll find most of the common vocabulary there. The point being, and then also Google adult learning theory, and you'll get like the 4 principles of adult learning theory, and you should be fluent with those ideas. A lot of the stuff is you know as teachers, it's different vocabulary. But general biggest things of UDL is multiple ways to represent information and multiple ways to demonstrate learning.
Great. Well, I think that's it. And we can stay on and answer your question, but everyone else, unless there's any other questions, we should be good. And is wondering so the portfolio, does it represent the actual training or the representation of the training's effectiveness?
It is the actual training, but you should also, however you're presenting your portfolio, you should have the analysis piece and the evaluation piece next to that. So if you just developed it in something like Rise, then you're going to need to put that like on your website above it or below it. If you do decide to build it in Canopy, then you can add like a lesson above it and a lesson below it, where you have audio narration that discusses how it went.
Great. Well, thank you. Yes, thank you, everyone. Lots of things coming in from the chat. We really appreciate your time tonight. Great.
Cool. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. I hope this was useful. As folks are logging out, again, message me through the chat in that course if you have any other questions. And then Anna and I are going to hold on to debrief afterwards as you all disappear.